Quest 2 controller thumbstick drift. Now it's a problem I was experiencing, and I think a lot of other Quest 2 users have been experiencing too, seeing as the first video I made on fixing thumbstick drift received over 250,000 views, which is by far my most successful video to date. So this first video on fixing thumbstick drift, I tried to fix it by cleaning the thumbstick. So one of the causes of thumbstick drift can be dirt which gets inside. And in that video I show you how to do that. And I think if you're experiencing thumbstick drift, that's probably the first thing you can try, as it's probably the most easiest thing you can do to help the problem. In my case, it actually fixed my thumbstick drift. But over the past week or so, I've noticed it coming back, and that's because another cause of thumbstick drift can be basic wear and tear of the joystick. Over time, it wears down, and when it gets to that point, you either need to replace the joystick or replace the controller. And in this video, I'll show you how to open up your Quest 2 controller and replace the old joystick with a new one. And I can safely say I have replaced this joystick. There's no thumbstick drift whatsoever. It's as good as new. So it's worked for me. Hopefully it can work for you. If you do like the video, remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed already and want to be kept up to date with all the latest Quest 2 news, reviews, tips and tricks like this, then please do subscribe. So this is the joystick replacement kit that I got from Amazon. I'm not sure if it's the best kit nor even the cheapest, but it's the one I'm using here. You'll find a link to this kit in the description below. One thing I will say about it is that the joysticks come properly packaged. Sometimes they don't, and that can break the joysticks in transit, so they come in this box which protects them. I've removed the battery and the battery cover here, and we're going to start by taking off this sticker to expose the screws underneath. So my controller has 3 screws. Your controller might be a little bit different, but it's really simple. Just take out all the screws from this handle. I'm using a T5 Torx screwdriver bit to take these screws out, and that's the bit I use throughout the whole video. And quick tip, using a simple piece of paper and a marker pen, you can group and label them to help you keep track of where they go when you reassemble the controller. It's also a good idea just to take a photo of the screws when they're inside the controller as a reference point for where they go later on, or of course you can just use this video. Next thing we do is we take off the face of the controller. This requires a flat, thin object. So here I'm using this piece of metal that comes with the kit. You can use a Stanley knife or similar flat object like that to get in underneath it. Then once you've made a gap, you can use this pry tool that I'm using here that came with the kit, or a simple flat edge screwdriver will also work. Now something to note, I've taken this thing off before, so it's a little bit easier the second time around. To see me do it the first time, you can check out my previous video where I cleaned the joystick, and it's a bit harder the first time around because there's this black sticky adhesive that you kind of need to cut away before you can pry it off. Essentially the trick here is just to be gentle, work your way around the face, prying as you go, but don't apply too much force because it's held on by that adhesive and also these plastic pegs, and you don't want to break anything. So just be patient, take your time, and eventually after some prodding, prying and poking, it should come off. There's 8 screws to remove from the face with the T5 Torx screw bit. Now this is where it comes in handy to have a shortened screwdriver handle like the one that comes with the kit, as a longer handle would hit the tracking ring on the outside and make the screws more difficult to remove. You'll also see I removed the cap on the thumbstick just because it's easier to access the screws with that out the way. To remove that, just get it in a pincer grip between your thumb and finger and pull, and it should pop off fairly easily. Then we take off the outer ring shell by pushing in this notch on the inside here, whilst I pull on the opposite half of the ring, trying to get my fingers underneath to prise it open. Once I popped the first bit out, I just work my way around the ring, prising as I go, and being careful not to apply too much force. There's a little adhesive here that sticks the ring in place, but it's still fairly easy to remove, and can be done just by hand. Next, we want to pull the handle apart. Now there's a knack to doing this because of a plastic locking mechanism inside. You need to apply upward pressure with the hand on the battery side of the grip, while simultaneously exerting an opposite downward pressure with the hand on the grip button side. Then with that same hand, pull the handle away from the other half of the controller to separate them. You notice that the top of the controller is attached to the half of the handle with the grip button via a ribbon cable. You can't see it too well here, but if I show you that half once I've removed the cable, you can see there's a latch that needs to be flipped up to release the ribbon cable. You can use a pair of needle nose tweezers like the ones that come with the kit. On the motherboard, in the top half of the controller, is another ribbon cable that attaches the joystick to the board. Now lift the latch in the same way you did previously to release the ribbon cable there, then proceed to remove the 4 screws that attach the motherboard to the controller. There's just one screw here that's difficult to get because it's hidden behind this trigger. You have to approach it from an angle. It means you have to apply a little bit of force to the screw bit, pushing down on the screw to get a purchase. Then lift the motherboard, but just enough to pull out the joystick. Try not to lift it too much, as you might find some of the buttons fall out and you need to put them back. Now the joystick itself has 3 parts. There's the joystick mechanism, there's a spring that sits atop it, then the rubber thumbstick cap that we removed earlier. Now you can discard the original joystick mechanism, but make sure you still keep the spring and the rubber cap because we will be reusing those pieces. And I'll just quickly take the old joystick mechanism apart to show you the little sensor that can sometimes get dirty and be the cause of thumbstick drift. Place the spring over your replacement joystick mechanism, making sure it is aligned properly, and lift the motherboard again just high enough to slide the new joystick into place. Then reattach the motherboard to the controller with the 4 screws and make sure the joystick and buttons can be moved and pressed without any trouble before attempting to put the controller back together again, because the last thing you want is to put everything back in its place only to find that a button is stuck because it's been misplaced or the joystick isn't moving properly. So make sure that's all behaving as it should before we start reassembling the controller. I won't go through reassembly because it's basically the same steps we just went through, but in reverse. Obviously make sure you connect the ribbon cable of your new joystick to the motherboard and then flip down the latch to lock it in place. And as you reassemble it, you'll notice that there are a few tricky parts to reassembly, like reattaching the ribbon cable that connects the lower half of the controller to the top half. It's also a little difficult getting the handle back together. Now I did this by starting to align the bottom half of the controller first and clicking that into place before working my way up to click the top half into place. That just worked better for me. All I'll say is just make sure you take your time when reassembling and refer back to these instructions when you need to. And there it is, now you have your brand new joystick in your Quest controller. And as I mentioned earlier, the joystick's working perfectly fine for me. It responds as it should and there's absolutely no drift, so I'm very happy. So that's it for this video. I do hope I've helped you with your thumbstick drift problems. If I have, I'd appreciate a like. And if you feel I've earned a subscription, that would be great too, as it really helps support this channel. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.